We hear now Armchair Astronomy with members of the American Museum Hayden Planetarium staff talking to WBAI's David W. Teske.
This is the 47th in our continuing series of programs on astronomy. Contributing their time and knowledge to this venture are members of the American Museum Hayden Planetarium staff. They come hoping to give us laymen a fuller understanding of our universe. On today's program, the topic of the discussion is the southern sky. With us today is Mr. James S. Pickering of the American Museum Hayden Planetarium and Dr. Kenneth L. Franklin of the American Museum Hayden Planetarium. Welcome both of you, and Mr. Pickering, will you start off?
Thank you, Dave. What we're going to talk about today are stars that we never see from here. You have to really move to take these stars in, because they all lie below the curve of the southern horizon as it appears to us from our location here in the middle northern latitudes. Now, it is fortunate, perhaps for us who live in this part of the world, that most of the big, spectacular, exciting sights in the sky to be seen without a telescope are so situated that we can see them through the year without traveling. But of course there is the southern sky, which frankly no man ever saw until history was pretty well along, because the early civilizations all lived in what is technically the northern hemisphere, and this part of the sky wasn't known to them. Some of it, the edges of it you might say, were because of the great overwhelming motion of the sky, the precession of the equinox, which brought things into view long, long ago, which are now no longer visible to us. But in general, the things we're going to talk about today are things you can't see from here. And as I say, fortunately for us, there are not too many of them. There are a number of notable objects. And as is the case with the skies of the various seasons that we have talked about through the years, there is probably one starting point which we can use, and which is a constellation which is known to almost everybody, and even though everybody hasn't seen it, and that is the Southern Cross. Now, the Southern Cross comprises a practically complete constellation, and I believe it's the smallest one in area in the whole sky. It is a cross of stars, and while I haven't seen it in actuality, I have seen it here in the planetarium, and I am not nearly as impressed by the Southern Cross as I am by the Great Northern Cross in Cygnus, which is to me much more symmetrical and covers a tremendous amount of area and is really impressive. But the Southern Cross is interesting from the nature of the stars that make it up more, I think. Of course, Mark Twain saw the Southern Cross and complained about it. He said it was not nearly as spectacular as he had been led to believe. And there is a fourth star, fairly bright, in the figure of the Southern Cross, which is off-center. In other words, it doesn't nail the two arms of the cross together. To make the thing symmetrical, it should be right in the middle. And there is a star in the Northern Cross there in the middle section. But Mark Twain said he was going to write to his congressman and have things fixed up, but he must have overlooked it or something, because it's still off-center.
You know, we have the chance of doing that in our planetarium.
Yes, we.
I don't.
Incidentally, that is one way of identifying the Southern Cross. The Southern Cross has a small practical use, too. The long axis of the cross, the up and down axis, is aimed, going south from it, almost at the south celestial pole of the skies, just as the pointers of the Big Dipper are aimed almost at the north celestial pole of the sky. The difference is about the same. But at least you have an idea where it is. Now, there is a combination of stars in the neighboring constellations of Vela and Carina, which in general looks very much like the Southern Cross, and which is called the False Cross. And it's tipped away from north and south direction of its long axis by about 60 degrees. I don't know whether this is true or not, but tradition is that some mariners on a cloudy, spotty night have spotted this formation of stars and said, now we know where we are, and steered for the south and waked up in Hawaii or something like that, because they had picked the wrong cross. But the misplaced star in the Southern Cross will identify it. And there is another means of identifying the Southern Cross. There are a pair of pointers to it, which are off to one side of it, two very bright stars. In fact, one of them is number 2 in visual brightness in the whole sky, and it is a very well-known and famous star. These two stars belong to the constellation of the Centaurus, which surrounds the Crux, the constellation of the Southern Cross, on 3 sides. The nearest one to the cross, in a line almost horizontal and pointing toward the center of the cross, these two are, the nearest one of the two is Beta Centauri, which is intrinsically a very bright star in its own right. And the one more distant of the two is Alpha Centauri, a very famous star. It is the nearest neighbor to the Sun. It is 4 1/3 light years away, which is the main reason why it looks as bright as it does. It's breathing down our necks. It is, incidentally, a star very much like the Sun in character and in real brilliance and everything else. If you want to find out what the Sun would look like if you moved it back to over 4 light years away, you've got it in Alpha Centauri. It's the same type of star, and it is a complicated star, though. It has a companion in a close association with it, and then there is a third little fellow which moves around the central two, and this third one so moves that occasionally it is even closer to us than the main visual star Alpha Centauri. This one is far below naked eye visibility, but it is called Proxima, the nearest, because occasionally it will be a little bit closer, say about 4 light years away, as against the 4 1/3 of the main body of Alpha Centauri. But they are probably the best known features of the southern sky, the Southern Cross, Alpha Centauri, and its companions. The Centaur is a great sprawling constellation, some of which, frankly, could be seen. The upper levels of it can be seen from here, if you knew where to look and when to look. It's up in the summertime. When I say up, it reaches its culmination, its northern culmination in the summertime. And at the time the Big Dipper is prominent in the sky, if you can see the upper part of Centaurus skirting along the southern horizon. There's nothing that we can see above our horizon to identify it especially, but there's where it is.
There's one interesting object in Centaurus that can be seen from, the middle southern part of the United States, Omega. This is a tremendous globular cluster that is really stupendous. It's a really beautiful sight to see. And it comes crawling across the horizon, and if you've got a good southern horizon and a good clear night with not much haze, you can see this as a fuzzy patch going across the sky. It's much more spectacular than the one in Hercules that is so famous for us in the northern hemisphere.
Well, that's a pity that Omega Centauri isn't up higher, or probably be a great deal better known than it is now, and more popular. There are several clusters, the globular clusters, that are more spectacular really than Hercules are, but they're unfortunately situated. There's another one, I think it's M22 in Sagittarius, which is really brighter than M13.
These that you're talking about are close to the center of the galaxy, and this is one of the things that makes the southern sky quite spectacular. If you get down there to look at it, is the fact that we see stars spread out along the Milky Way there, and this is the very center of the Milky Way system in which we live.
And of course, since we are farther from the edge there, we've got more stars in our line of sight. And
right.
That makes incidentally, the Milky Way down there runs right through the region we've been talking about, the Centaurus and the Southern Cross. And in the Southern Cross, really in the constellation, and a part of it is one of the famous places in the sky, which is a vast cloud, if I may call it that, of cosmic dust, the coal sack, which can be obviously discerned without a telescope because it's been known for a long, long time. And this is a blotting out of the great stream of stars of the Milky Way. by this cloud of inert dark material lying between us and those stars. And originally, as I understand it, going back in history, these were called holes in the sky. They thought there were no stars. There was just a vacant place. But of course, we know better now, and that this dark material, which the whole Milky Way is streaked and spotted with it all the way around. But this is a particularly dense cloud, obviously, and which is the coal sack, and it's right there in the southern section of the Southern Cross, in the southern half of it, just off to one side.
This is quite interesting because I think you can compare in just a purely accidental way the Southern Cross and its coal sack and the Northern Cross and the Great Rift in the along Cygnus there. Of course, you have to be far from the city lights and a good dark night in the summertime to see Cygnus well in the northern sky and this great rift, but it is a spectacular sight once you make it out. Incidentally, I wanted to say something, Jim, when you were talking about the cross. The people in the southern hemisphere have always used this thing as a clock. Even the primitive people have used it as a clock. They time the affairs of the night by when they see it rising and when they see it vertical and when they see it down again. This is practically universal to anybody that can see the southern sky. They have been able to use that Southern Cross as an indicator of time in the night.
Just as we do primitively, I suppose, with the sun in the daytime. There's morning.
This is the same sort of thing, right? Yes.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that. I know that had been done with the Big Dipper and with Cassiopeia in the north to some extent, but.
Well, I think we're a little more sophisticated with that, though. Here they just say, well, I'll meet you when the cross is halfway up, or something like that, and then you can go out and hunt snipe or something with them.
Well, adjoining the area of Crux and Centaurus is an enormous region of the sky which was once taken up by one tremendous constellation, the Argo Novus, the ship of the Argonauts, connected up with the legend of Jason and the Golden Fleece and Medea and all the rest of it. Now this constellation, which stood for a long, long time, was tremendous. It was so big that it was hard to handle. It contained, of course, simply because it covered a tremendous area, a great many stars, and they began to run out of symbols for them, and the whole thing was just unwieldy. So it has now been broken up into three fairly modern constellations, and they all have the same nautical implication. One is Carina, the keel of the ship, which is obviously the more southern, the lower part of the thing from a northern viewpoint. And one of the very bright stars in the sky is in Carina, which is a rather long, sprawling east and west constellation there, and that is Canopus. Canopus is a star that is fairly just below our normal southern horizon. I don't think you can ever see it here.
I've seen it from Lick Observatory.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yes,
you're a little
but
farther south.
That's 38 south, yes.
Yeah, a few
37.
degrees, a couple of degrees further south. But as I say, it's pretty near the border of this hidden southern region. It's a tremendous star, a big, bright one. The rest of the ship is made up of two more constellations, Vela, the sails, and Puppis, the deck. Now, Puppis and Vela can be seen, the upper parts of them. In fact, all of Puppis can be seen from this part of the world. It isn't very spectacular. It comes along just below Sirius and Canis Major and so on. And Vela is the sails of the ship. And as I say, Vela and Carina contain this formation of stars that I spoke of, which is the false cross. It's a deceiving thing.
Actually, it's a better looking cross than the real cross, I think.
It is. And it's nailed in the middle, which would please Mark Twain a great deal. But there are two other things which we must mention in the southern sky, which cannot possibly be seen from this part of the world, and those are the so-called Magellanic Clouds, getting their name traditionally, I believe, from the fact that they were first seen by the sailors who went on this famous voyage of Magellan, which he personally never completed, but A couple of the ships got back anyway. It was the first one around the world, in which they cruised through the southern waters, went around through the Straits of Magellan, around the bottom end of South America, and so on. Now, these Magellanic Clouds, one the larger one and one smaller one, for obvious reasons, are the nearest external galaxies to our own system. They are irregular galaxies. Neither of them have the standard normal shape, which simply is normal because most of the galaxies we can see seem to possess it as sort of a, if you were to stand them up straight, they'd probably be circular in cross sections. You look directly at them, rather pie-shaped, thin, and on the edges were lenticular, looking at them from the edge, and circular from the top or bottom. These are irregular. They are relatively near at hand. Now, Ken, correct me, 150,000 light years?
Well, I think that they're of the order of 200,000 and 300,000. Yeah,
I'm
this is
using the old figuring there.
well, the new scale is changed things here by a factor of 2.
But they themselves, telescopically, are tremendous. They contain, the larger cloud in particular, contains several stupendous formations, the great nebulae and clusters there. And it is in a study of the stars of these clouds, which was made about, better than 50 years ago, started by Miss Henrietta Leavitt, in which the secret of the Cepheid variable stars, which we spoke about some time ago when we were talking the autumn sky, Delta Cephus is the prototype of these stars whose variation gives a clue to their absolute magnitude and therefore to their distance. It was in a study of the stars in the Magellanic Clouds, in which there are a number of such variable stars, that led Henrietta Leavitt and Harlow Shapley into the ultimate discovery that these things did give us a clue to distances because of their variation of light and so forth and so on.
These little galaxies are really satellites of our
I know they have often been spoken of. I didn't know whether that had been determined.
Well, they're so close to us that they have to be completely...
similar perhaps to the tail end of the Whirlpool galaxy up in...
Well, now that's a moot thing in Canis Venatici. They're not sure whether that lump is really a part of that galaxy or not. No, I would say that they're more like the two companions of Andromeda Galaxy. Yeah. Yes.
Well, there they are anyway.
There they are.
They are the nearest.
Yeah.
Andromeda is often spoken of as the nearest because of its spectacular brightness, I guess. But these really are the nearest of the external galaxies to ours, and as Dr. Franklin says, probably satellites of our galaxy in a system with it.
They really look like detached parts of the Milky Way.
Yes,
I've
they
seen
are
these
irregular.
things down there.
I've never seen them, but I've seen photographs of them, of course, and they are kind of the pieces broken off.
Yes.
They have that appearance. Incidentally, they too serve as a sort of a rough aid to navigation because from their positions they make an equilateral triangle almost with the South Celestial Pole. Now, we've spoken of the South Celestial Pole in connection with the long axis of the Southern Cross pointing at it. There isn't any South Star. In fact, the constellation of octans, the octant, and that leads us to something we'll talk about in a minute, which contains the South Celestial Pole, is singularly devoid of bright stars. It's really a kind of a nothing in the sky. There is no specific marker or guide or point to which you can point from the Earth and say, see that star, that marks the South Celestial Pole, as you can with Polaris in the north. Which must present a problem to navigators. I am not a navigator, so I can't speak certainly, but you've got to do a little dead reckoning here to find out where you are when you get down there, if you ever get that far, because very few people have ever been directly under that point, but there it is, or there it isn't, you might say. Octans, the octant, an octant is an instrument similar to the sextant but covering a smaller angle, a navigating instrument, is one of the inventions of the good Abbe Lacaille, who went down to the and charted the southern skies a couple of hundred years ago.
Just about.
I don't know the man, of course, but
well,
he
you're
must.
Not that old,
no,
Jim.
not quite. But he must. He was, to me, utterly devoid of poetry or imagination or the milk of human nature or anything else, because he charted the skies and he went to town. I think he named 14 constellations in the southern sky. Now, taking the constellations as a whole, the ones we know, there's a lot of poetry, there's a lot of story, there's a lot of grandeur in their names. But this man, the octant, first of all, the air pump, for heaven's sake is good. Antlia pneumatica, the air pump, the fishnet reticulum, the compass, Pix, the ruler, the straight edge, Norma, and so on, and even the keel, the deck, and the sails, they're not too bad. But why? I mean, there are so many marvelous poetic concepts that he could have used, and here he fills it. I suppose he had pity for the sailors and the Argonauts, and he put in these staid things down there. The other men didn't do too badly. We have Hydrus, the husband of Hydra, the great sprawling water serpent of the north. Well, Hydrus, who was a little fellow, is down here. Incidentally, the end of Eridanus, the great river, flows down across the sky and winds up in Achernar, the end of the river, which is one of the big bright stars in the sky, too, which is just out of sight from this part of the world. But I don't know how, I really couldn't tell you exactly which constellations Abilakai named, because we begin to get into some, but there is, believe it or not, there's a table, Mainsaw, which, let's give him his due, was named Table Mountain, really.
Table Mountain, well, that's based upon something around the Cape of Good Hope.
Yeah, Cape of Good,
right.
Cape of Good Hope, that's the
yeah.
one. That isn't too bad. But there's a fly, a housefly down there, Musca.
Well, now Musca was not...
that wasn't Lakai?
No, that was not Lakai. That came before Lakai.
Yeah. Well, somebody of the same general.
Well, there are a lot of curious things in the southern sky. You mentioned that no one really knew too much about it. This is true.
Yeah.
Probably the first expedition that went into the south at all was a circumnavigation of Africa about 600 B.C., ordered by one of the pharaohs of Egypt. And the party came back with tales of this wonderful sky down there, but nothing much was done about it until much later. But it is surprising how many constellations are really there and covering up the sky.
Yeah, they're small. There are no great sprawling affairs there. Very few exceptions.
Lakai found a lot of empty space, and so he just felt like he had to fill it up, I think. Several months ago, Jim, I had an interesting experience with jigsaw puzzles. Don't know whether you're interested in doing jigsaw puzzles, but...
I have been hooked myself.
Well, that's my problem. I can get hooked in these things, and then I wish I hadn't been. But perhaps you've seen circular jigsaw puzzles in the stores. Well, there is a circular jigsaw puzzle now that contains some rather beautiful artwork of the southern sky. And the experience I had was that the Springbok people who put these out came to the planetarium and got a hold of me to try to figure out something about this particular painting representation of the southern sky, and I found it quite fascinating to go into it. One of the pieces about this particular work of art is the fact that it's loaded with color, and it's got realistic representations as you can have of fanciful things like centaurs and a phoenix and what have you. One of the people around here said, well, if I could see all of those things in the sky, I wouldn't go to sleep at night. It is really quite beautiful, but it's an interesting thing in that it's done by an unknown artist or an unknown astronomer or both. I was able to date the coordinates of this. There are coordinates on it, so that it represents the sky as of about 1800. But the actual constellation figures are older than that because they do not contain any of Lacaille's work. And he came back in 1752. Now, of course, communications in those days was not too great, and it may have been several years before his work got spread around the world.
Common knowledge, yes, I can understand that.
So I believe that this particular thing was certainly done before 1800 and not too much after 1750. Another thing is that the Southern Cross is named Cruzeiro here, and this is a Portuguese word for the cross, so it may be that this artist represented the sky for a Brazilian audience. Another thing is that Orion, who is upside down in this representation,
well, he would be from the southern sky.
He would be from the southern sky. He has a helmet on, which is quite characteristic of the conquistadores. So I suspect that there was a Latin audience of the New World for this particular work. There's some other interesting things in it, too. For instance, there's a little constellation called Cancer Minor, which is right next to Cancer. And Cancer is supposed to be a crab, but it looks more like a crayfish to me. And little Cancer Minor looks like it, too. And this constellation has been quite lost in the...
I never heard of it.
The wiggles of the lore of the sky. Well, it was put into the sky by... Lubunitsky, about 1667, thereabouts. He was an astronomical illustrator who, did this sort of thing, I guess. And there's another interesting little constellation that is lost to modern times, and that is Gallus, the gamecock.
Oh, yes.
And that was put in by Jacob Bartsch about 1624. So the fellow who did this artistic work was up on some of these and down on others, apparently. Triangulum austrinus is here.
Yeah, well, that's still around.
This is not, yes, it's still around, and this is one of the things that Abbé Lacaille did not put in. However,
no, he didn't.
However, his straight edge and ruler, Norma and Regula, these are his, and they are in that vicinity of the sky.
Yeah, the compass, not a ship's compass, but a drawing compass.
A drawing compass, yeah.
The divider,
drawing circles.
Sarcinus, that's right next to Triangulum Australis.
Well, our technician put that in, Mr. Lacaille. There are beautiful representations here of the phoenix, which is this bird that rises up out of its own ashes. And of course, this is an old constellation that is not at all modern.
Well, that's one of the more northern ones. That undoubtedly could be seen a long time ago because of the precession of the equinoxes.
This is the motion, of course, as you know, of the axis of the Earth. Caused by the pull of the moon on the bulge of the Earth and so forth. This is what causes the pole to move in a great circle around the sky, or in a large circle, it's not a great circle, in about 26,000 years. Well, this brings some stars into our view in the south that were not there before and hides others. Now, there is a circle in the sky in which there are relatively modern constellations. And this has led some people to believe that our constellations were more or less fixed in our culture about 2400 BC when the center of that area was the South Pole.
Yeah. Because Ara, the altar, which is bordering on, goes quite far south, is a name of antiquity too. That's not a modern one.
Then we have a peacock. We have
a crane,
an Indian boy.
Yes.
And we have this particular work, Argo Navis, is Argo Nawaki here, which is Noah's Ark, which is an interesting representation of it. And it's got the flying fish, Dorado, and
Flying fish, let me interrupt you, but that is the constellation which contains the larger Magellanic Cloud, Dorado.
Yes, it's rather curious that this particular representation that I'm talking about does not show either the Magellanic Clouds, and it doesn't show the Milky Way, although you can pick it out if you just look at the concentration of stars that are present in it. Incidentally, if there are any people in the audience who really like to know more about the sky and the constellation names and their meanings, we can recommend Allen's book, which has been republished by Dover quite recently. Star Names, Their Lore and Meaning. So lots of good looking for a lot of people.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. We have been listening to Mr. James S. Pickering and Dr. Kenneth L. Franklin speaking about the southern sky. We hope you will join us next week, and if you have any topics or questions you would like explained or talked about, indicate them by card or letter to Armchair Astronomy, WBAI, 30 East 39th Street, New York, 16, New York. We will try to answer as many questions as possible in future programs. Until next week, good day.
This has been Armchair Astronomy with members of the American Museum Hayden Planetarium staff talking to WBAI's David W. Teske.